Okay, this session is being recorded and both the recording and the accompanying resources will be shared with you this afternoon. I know that we have a big mix of participants on the call today, some frequent users of the compact and those that have not accessed it in a while. So with that in mind, we'll start by providing some background on the compact, how we arrived at this new grant, what qualifies as eligible training, and then we'll dive into some specifics on the new grant and the new memorandum of agreement. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Dan Bellier, our Chief Workforce Development Officer.
Well, I'd say good morning, but it isn't morning anymore. It's the afternoon. So good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be on this webinar with so many of you who've been involved with our activity through the Harold Alphon Center for the Maine's Workforce. I'll go through a few slides here this morning, maybe to talk more granularly about who the Harold Alphon Center for the Advancement of Maine's Workforce is, and a few steps on the benefits and our definition of frontline workers. We've been on a journey here since 2018 on bringing public and private resources to employers here in Maine. We're really proud of the work that we've accomplished, and I'll go through that here shortly. But by the end of December, we will have facilitated training to almost 30,000 Mainers, which is pretty exciting. Let me talk just about the compact and what the compact means. Go to the back, previous slide, please. No, the other way. There we go, right back to that one. So the Maine Workforce Development Compact is an agreement between the Maine Community College System, the Harold Alphon Center for the Advancement of Maine's Workforce, Maine's employers, organizations, and associations, so that we can deploy up to $1,200 or 50% of funding to be provided for incumbent workers. As you know, and many of you may not know if you haven't participated, this is a one-to-one match of private money to money that is being provided by employers. And we're pretty proud of this model. Matter of fact, we've been talking about this model nationally. So again, this is not a legal agreement. We're going to get into some of those benefits here later. But if we can go to the next slide. This is some of the impact that's happened since the conception of our current grant we're in. End of June, we trained facilitated training for 27,454 folks. We have a compact membership at the end of June of over 1,600. Today, we're over 1,750, and we've deployed over $10 million to Maine employers and organizations to provide incumbent worker training. The center has been successful at reaching 95% of Maine's communities. You can see the heat map here showing where the projects are, and we're all across the state. The other thing that's really interesting about our compact of over 1,700 is it represents almost half of Maine's workforce. Maine currently has a workforce of about 690,000 individuals. And the compact that you are all members of represents nearly 330,000 of those folks. Very exciting that we've been able to touch so many folks. The other piece that's interesting about the compact is it serves 75% of our members have fewer than 100 employees, and matter of fact, 60% have fewer than 50. So we are working with small, medium, and large-sized businesses across the state. And why are we focusing in on frontline workers? Well, the reason why we're focusing in on frontline workers is nationally only 20% of professional development training goes to frontline workers. The majority of professional development goes to C-suite or managers or supervisors. So we felt, and with the Harold Alphon Foundation, that this is a great way to help upskill Maine's workforce. We know Maine's the oldest state in the nation. We have a number of people retiring. So we have to upskill our incumbent workers. So that's why it's important to focus in on that. You can see right now on the current slide showing the trajectory of the work that we've been doing. And again, we're in the current grant of 2022 to 2024. That's what we call our grant number 2. And that's where we have been deploying $15.5 million in incumbent worker training and scholarships. And then at the same time, we've been deploying $35.5 million from Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan for entry-level positions. As we work our way into the new grant, which starts on January 1st of 2025, we're going to have money for all 3 sectors. Entry-level training, incumbent worker training is what we're talking about here today, and again, scholarship. Our goal
Theo,
over
you can actually be out here, honey. This is one.
the goal for our next 5.5 years is train 70,505 folks, incumbent workers, and scholarships. Next slide. And again, like I said, why frontline workers? Because the money for training doesn't get to frontline workers. So with this grant, we've changed that model. And that's why we're deploying these resources directly to employers, associations, and government organizations. Next slide. I'll now turn it over to Charlie Collins, Executive Director of the Harold Alphonse Center for the Advancement of Maine's Workforce. Charlie, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Dan, and good to see everybody today. I'm going to go over some slides as we move forward under the new grant starting in January, as Dan had mentioned, into what we are greenlighting as training requests and the ones that won't be funded, just so that we can start giving our compact members an idea of some of the changes that may be occurring with the new grant. So starting with the trainees, as in the original grant, must be in Maine and work for a Maine organization. We realize there are some organizations that have operations that have headquarters outside the state, but they have operations in the state, and those organizations that have operations in the state qualify. Again, just re-emphasizing the training of frontline incumbent workers. And those, again, as Dan had suggested, is those folks who are not in the C-suite and are not in any of the vice presidential higher levels of an organization. We really, the emphasis of these dollars should be going to your frontline staff. Training that enhances an individual's skills and advance their careers. We know that a lot of times companies have trainings that are policy oriented, meaning we're going to do an annual safety training or we're going to do an annual policy training. Those don't necessarily enhance the skills, and they won't be approved going forward in the new grant. So you'll need to really be thinking about, when you put your training funding requests in, are these trainings that really enhance an individual's skill and advance their careers? And then the last on this checked box, the green check box, training through Maine's community colleges through a third-party trainer or through in-house training. This has been an element of the training program from the beginning. Obviously, in addition to working with our community colleges, if you have done so, that's still included. But what really has opened this up to so many different other training providers is that you as an employer can pick the third-party trainer, or you can conduct the training in-house. And this has created a massive amount of flexibility for organizations to use this grant in a way that best suits them. Some of the things, again, just worth repeating, these training dollar requests should not be for folks in the C-suite. And this includes your volunteers of your organization and your board members or elected officials. Again, we've had requests over the years, and we've unfortunately had to deny those requests for the folks in these situations. Also, the required annual training that's policy driven, meaning we want our staff to know our policies in the company, that will not be funded going forward. You really, again, need to look at what is the skill sets that we're offering in our training. And reimbursement for travel expenses or employee wages are also not funded. And we get that question, and it's a fair question, but these training dollars do not reimburse somebody's travel to a training or the lost wages or the wages that they may be while they're in training that they're not working. So we wanted to make that clear. Also, the one cutout, like I said, I think there's a lot we do cover. But one of the things we've had requests for, believe it or not, is, hey, my professional training is this publication subscription I get every year. We don't count those either. We would not fund publication subscriptions for training. And then anything what we consider non-professional development training. These have to be, these are things that are more personal that people are doing, or something, oh, I might be interested in heading in this direction someday. It really does have to be focused on the work. And obviously in the industry, hopefully as an employer, you're hoping they're getting training in. So we wanted to just make those points. We know there'll be questions. We are very open to hearing what your questions are and helping you understand what we can fund and what we can't fund. So don't be afraid to ask or to check on things like that. So what kind of training are you talking about? So we clearly are talking about the industry-specific training that exists in the state now and has been going on for years. We have things in financial service compliance, training for employees in banking, as an example there. But obviously, there's a lot of role-specific training, LinkedIn, in these examples, a LinkedIn advertising course for somebody in marketing is an example. Professional development and career advancement, somebody, a medical assistant taking a course to earn a degree in nursing, clearly allowable in this grant. And we allow for company-wide training that, again, builds a skill and builds on somebody's ability to do their job better and offer some career advancement. The core skills training includes training in dealing with difficult customers, conflict resolution, especially in our hospitality worker and other industries. Obviously, those are included. And training required for certification or licensure. Examples, CPR training for childcare workers, as an example. Again, we're trying to give you sort of the sense of the wide variety of types of trainings and how we look at them. This is not, excuse me, this is not a complete list, and we encourage anytime you have a question about an allowable training, just ask, and we're happy to walk you through that as we go from there. And then why this new MOA? What's going on? Well, what we've been very successful in doing is working with grant funders and other state and private funding, bringing it together in the center and showing that the state of Maine and their employees are hungry for training, and it's helping them tremendously. And when we've produced some of the numbers that Dan showed you earlier, those are far exceeding the initial goals that the grant set up. And so with that, we've been able to have great conversations with private funding sources, and obviously looking at internally at our own sources and saying, there's a huge need here. We need to keep this going. Given the economic realities of the state of Maine, we know skilling up is a real strategy that can help fill some key skill gaps. So we were able to, under this new grant cycle for 25 to 2030, secure additional private foundation money, and we have plans in place for what additional public-private funds will do to help support this. We also know we have to tweak and update a process. And so we want this program to be as widely used as possible, as Dan said, with the small, medium, and even some of the larger companies that are using these programs. So to do that, we had to tweak the program as we went along. And some of those things I mentioned in the above slides as an example. And then the last thing I've got on this list is the fact when people ask us, well, what's the catch? What is it that I've got to do? What we tell them is these private foundations and other state funding needs to understand how the money's being used. Is it being effective? So that goes to the importance of data. So what we do ask of our compact members is, we need first of all, we need your application for funding with the data about what the training is, and the details around that. And then we need to know who you're training and what you're training them in, and how did it go? How did it go? And what is the long-term effects of that training on folks? So that really points to the importance of data and why we're sending out a new memorandum of agreement, which will outline things. Again, it's going to be the same format in a digital form with a digital signature, but you'll be seeing some specific things that we're going to highlight in that MOA that we really need to create information back in aggregate form to our funders in doing that. So that's the reason for the new MOA and starting things in January. And here are some key dates. So we are going to start getting the new MOA distributed on December 4th. And you'll start seeing emails going out to you where you'll be able to review that, sign that. And remember, this is a new MOA. So even if you've been a long-term Compact member, you'll need to review and sign and send back this new MOA. Come mid-December, we're going to open up the funding for the new year, for starting in January. We'll get a specific date to you, but around mid-December, those new funding requests can start coming in for programs that are starting in January of 2025 and beyond. And then all these new requirements and the things we're discussing on these information sessions go into effect on January 1st of 2025. So I think that brings me up to Chris Winstead, who's going to walk us through what's staying the same and what's being updated. Chris?
Thank you, Charlie. So as we've alluded to, there are some key factors that are staying the same. You heard Dan talk earlier. The Alpha funding provides to our Workforce Development Compact members up to $1,200 a year. That is a match, so it's a one-for-one match, and that's available per frontline worker. This is very much employer-driven. This is about you telling us what you need for your employees and the training that's going to help them be able to grow and advance within their positions. We're going to have the same request process. So requests need to come in prior to the start date of any training. And then we will ask that there is completion data that's submitted at the end of the training. This helps us in being able to not only track the performance of those trainings, but to be able to work on the comprehensive training record for each of your employees. We still have our same dedicated staff. So we have our regional support from our workforce development coordinators. We will be adding to that mix after the new year. So we will have a new person for the Kennebec Valley Community College region. And then data collection. Data collection is still the same. We're still going to be asking for the same information. So who's going into that training? Who completes that training? What was their grade at the completion of that training? We're still going to have exit surveys and follow-up surveys. These are both requirements of the grant. Our funder wants to know that these trainings, what the value was to your employees and to each of our main businesses. So that's what's staying the same. What's being updated? We're moving to one payment. So in the current grant, we have an 80%, 20% split. We'll be moving to one single payment at the end of the training. We are looking that within 45 days of the end of training. So for example, if my training request that I put in ends on January 1st, I would have through February 14th to get all of my data into the center. We are regulating the funding. So what that means is we will have some approvals that, depending on when they're paying out, we may be reaching out to our Workforce Development Compact members to adjust dates. And that's really to help us control the flow of those dollars that are going out from the center. There is a $250,000 annual employer cap. So what that means is one Compact member cannot exceed within a 12-month period $250,000 worth of Compact member funding. And then there is the ability for each of our Compact members to build within your request a 10% administrative fee, and that goes back to you, the Compact member. We have a new grant management system that's coming online in 2025. Our goal with RSM which is the company we're working with, is to create a portal that makes it a little more seamless for our compact members to not only submit your funding request, but be able to track where they are in that approval process, to be able to see where they are in the payment process. It will have prompted reminders based off of as we get to completion dates. We will also have our workforce development coordinators who will be reaching out to all of our compact members to say, you know, your training is coming up on its completion date. Don't forget that we're going to need this information. And then they will do the follow-up with each of the compact members. We are looking to do industry sector specific work with our compact members. And then under stages 3, what it allows for is it allows for additional scholarship dollars that are going out to each of our compact members, so that your employees who are employed and taking classes, not at a full-time registration, but 11 credit hours or less, have access to scholarship dollars. This is really towards that advancing your employees in their careers through these classes. And I do want to back up one step, one piece to the industry sector work. That's really looking across all 3 stages. Stage 1, which as Dan said, was the pre-hire. Stage 2, which is the incumbent, and stage 3, which is really working towards those associate degrees. And then obviously we have the ability for additional customized training through any of our campuses within the Maine Community College system. Data collection. So data collection, you've heard Charlie allude to this, you heard Dan allude to this. It's really something that's of the importance to not only us, but to our funders. It is one of our grant requirements. That's why we're asking for information regarding who's in the programs, who's doing the training. We're asking for information based off of the completion and then the success in those programs. It allows us to aggregate reports and really demonstrate the success. As Dan pointed to in one of our earlier slides, we were able to receive additional funding based off of our success, not only with our core group of work, which was the Maine Quality Centers and Put Me to Work, but our initial Alphon funding. Each of those subsequent grants have been awarded based off of the success of the prior round of funding. We will be asking for individual contact information. These are based on your employees who are taking that training, and that's so that we can get them into the system, which allows us to be able to pull together a comprehensive learner record. This is a tool for both you and your employees to demonstrate the training that they have completed. It's a nice tool that when they're looking at professional development with you, the HR professionals in your company, you have the ability to look at this and see, what did Chris Winstead take as training, right? What were the different pieces that he completed during his time? We do ask that the participants of the training participate in exit surveys and then also participate in follow-up surveys. Why this is important? It's important for demonstration to our funders how these dollars are being utilized. It's also in the case of stage 1, we have some requirements with that money that's attached that's non-Alphon funding. So Dan and Charlie both alluded to, you know, we're securing additional funding for that pre-hire. Some of those funding requirements require us to be able to do a check-in and track other data. And I am going to turn it back over to Heather.
Great. So what's next and what can you expect once you leave the call today and the foreseeable future? The first is resources. In the next slide, I'm going to cover what we've put together to support this transition. But just be aware, those will be included as well as the recording and transcript of this call in an email that goes out this afternoon. Number 2, and what we're all here to talk about, is the MOA, or the Memorandum of Agreement for the new grant. That is going to go out on December 4th. And in the meantime, if you have not yet, there is a form that is outlined in those resources to ensure that we get it to the right person. So if you have not filled that out yet, I would ask that you pay special attention to that. Our funding for 2025 will open mid-December, and we are requiring that MOA is signed and returned by that date. When the funding does go live, again, we will notify Compact members by email when that is up. As Chris covered, we have a new grant management system coming online, likely Q1 of 2025. If you're a frequent user of the Compact, you'll notice some new forms on our website later this month. Please know that that is in preparation of our new system. Our ultimate goal is to make this process as user-friendly as we can. And last but not least, we are always looking at ways in which we can bring additional value to our Compact members. We have a few initiatives planned that will be rolling out in 2025, including a survey in which you tell us what would be more beneficial to you and how our team can help. We're looking at putting together a custom training catalog of training offerings through Maine's community colleges. And then to a point that Chris spoke to as well, we are looking at industry sectors and the opportunity to create that pipeline from pre-hire training through professional development and beyond within your sector. So very much a lot to look forward to in the year to come. Here you will see a QR code with a bit.ly link. If you're not allowed to use bit.ly links within your organization, the last bullet point there is the full website of our MCCS site. So there you will find a copy or draft copy of the MOA so that you can read through that and know what it contains so that when the version does go live on December 4th, that will be there. There's an FAQ document for a lot of the questions that we've had coming in, and based on, I see that the chat has been very busy, so I'll take some commonly asked questions from there and add that to that document, but that's where you'll find that document as well. I will add this session's recording to that. If you have not used the Compact funding in a while, you will also find instructions on what that looks like to put in a funding request. Please know that as we transition to the new system, that will change slightly, and we will keep Compact members notified of that process as we go along. And as always, our workforce development coordinators have been busy answering questions in the chat. They are an incredible resource. Their contact information is on there. So if you're not familiar and do not know your current coordinator, please use them as a resource and get to know them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to questions. What I will ask folks to do is to use the raise hand feature available in Zoom. If you're not a frequent Zoom user, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little heart icon that says react. And it's the second bullet or the second option right from the bottom that says raise hand. So let's open it up for questions. And to our coordinators too, if you're seeing any questions in chat that should be brought up for the whole group, please feel free to answer those. Joven?
Hi, this is Dr. Rovin. We had a safety care trainer and a CPI trainer, but we lost both of them. One died and the other resigned. So I would like to ask if we can send somebody, we can pay from this fund. If we can have somebody trained paying the money from this fund, even though we are going to pay the travel and just to pay the training of trainer. Are we allowed to do that?
Charlie, do you want to take the trainer model? Is that allowed under training?
Yes. In other words, we have scenarios for in-house training where you have a staff member who is going to be the trainer for a group of people. And the way you might price that out, what that's costing per head, is to look at the cost of that trainer's hour, what you pay that trainer, how many hours they're doing the training and not doing their other job or the job, and sort of build a budget and build an idea of here's what the training is going to cost us. and divide that over the amount of people that's being trained.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. Hope.
Yes, hi. So couple of questions. I was told, and I never utilized this, that as the grant currently stands, there's funding for people to take college classes that aren't associated with court. Well, that's why we're court resources. And if that's plausible, how is that done now versus how is it done next time? Because I have a staff who's contemplating finishing up, I don't know if it's an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, but is looking for just a little additional funding. And he had signed up for the class and then sent me a bill, and I'm like, I can't do anything with this right now. I hope you didn't pay for it. So he retracted his class for this current semester, and so I'm not really sure where the grant's changing, when and how to direct him. And I know that there's a couple of other staff that are in that same boat.
Sure. So I think the question that I'm hearing is, so scholarships through Maine's
Yeah.
community colleges is a different pool of funding. And I did see some questions in the chat too, is does that count against the $1,200 income worker? That is a completely separate pool of funding. We'll say that anything under the current until December 31st remains under the MOA that you're currently under. So I think that is eligible. Does that answer your question? Hope?
So I guess how would this individual apply? It's for the this upcoming semester, the one that starts in, I think college starts in January. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Sorry for all you community college folks.
no worries. We will be putting out the funding form for that as well.
And
Okay, so
Hope,
should I
are
just
they?
wait for that form?
Yes, you would. And remember, the scholarships are community college scholarships,
Yeah.
half off, which equals to $212. The idea is that the employer or the student would pick up the other half of the cost.
And it's really important to mention here, Hope. They're separate. In other words, you can't look at your 1,200 for that employee and pay the other half. They're mutually different.
Right.
So just so you know, that match has to be paid by the learner or the employer for that scholarship.
Yeah, okay. And where would those forms be? Because you said that they're different. I haven't been able to find them, or I've been trying a little bit on my own, but I knew things were going to change, so I kind of waited.
Hope, where is your company? Where are you located?
South Portland.
Yeah, we're going to have Maureen O'Brien. We'll have Maureen O'Brien reach out to you to work on the specifics.
On the resource
Thanks.
page too, it will point to the link. So those, I can't pop them up right at this second, but you will have those this afternoon as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mary, I think is next on my list. Oh, sorry, Mary.
Hi. So my question is there an ideal time frame as far as applying for the grant? You know, should we be doing it a month in advance, 2 weeks in advance, you know, further out than that? And then what happens if the class, we've applied, for example, and we haven't received our letter yet saying that it's been approved and the class has already started? Will there be a way, I think you were saying through that RMS system, maybe to track that?
Sure. Chris, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, so Mary, for your current Mary, where are you located?
I'm out in Washington County. Edward is our person.
Okay, so Edward can reach out to you about your current compact member funding request that you put in that you haven't heard anything. Moving forward, what will happen is it's always a good idea as soon as you know you have that training to put in the request. It has to be in before the training starts. And with RSM, yes, you will be able to track that application process of where it is. So if there is, you know, a question or if there is a denial or some need for additional information, we will reach back out. But what you'll see is application submitted, where it is in that approval process. And then, as I mentioned, funding will be paid after the completion of the course and all data is in. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
let me follow up a little bit. This is Dan. The other piece that is that revolves around this grant is there's a certain amount of money that we're able to deploy per year over the five and a half year grant. So as much time as you can give us to get yourself in the queue is really important. And again, we cannot fund anything that doesn't have an approval from us. And if it started, we would not be able to fund that. So as much planning time as you can give us, that would be great. And again, the scholarships are deployed. We have a certain number that we're deploying in the spring and a certain number we deploy each year rolling through the grant.
Thank you. Edward.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on the doctor's question about train the trainer. Yes, we do fund organizations to train a trainer. That's a skill, actually. It's a training skill. So we would pay for you to have someone become a trainer or apply toward the $1,200 toward that cost so that you could then multiply that effort within your organization and have them as a resource. So yes, we do pay train the trainer costs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edward. Jody.
Question I have is you mentioned about the 10% admin fee. 10% of what?
So what, in that scenario, Jody, if we're putting in a request and let's say that request has a cost that's associated to it, you can go up to 10% of that total training cost as an admin fee. You're functionally, however, it will decrease the available dollars that's there for each of those candidates, right? So if you are looking at a training that let's say has a cost of $1,000 and you're adding that $100 onto it for the 10%, that is starting to eat away at that $1,200 per employee. In other words, per each of your employees annually, that's included within that up to $1,200. Does that make sense?
Great, thank
And
you.
just so people understand the reason for that, these systems we're building is going to require compact members to register, get students in, and for some organizations that can be a burden on some of them. We want to recognize the time we're asking you to self-register, get this stuff in, and get the reporting in and do those other things. So there's a reason for that to help you guys realize the cost of getting access to these training fundings and using them.
David.
Hi, I'm new to all of this, so just wanted to clarify that it's on the $1,200 trainee per calendar year. It's a match. There's nothing that is fully covered, and then for the scholarship opportunities, it's $212, which is also a match up to the $1,200. Is that correct?
So David, thank you for that question and for clarification. So the $1,200 comes specifically to incumbent workers that you're correct is a match. So if you had a particular employee who maxed out at $1,200, we know you as an organization also matched at $1,200. So that was like $2,400 for that employee's training. The course scholarships to the, and again, that's exclusively to 3-credit courses at the community colleges. Is a 50-50 match that does not take away from the $1,200. That's on top of. So you could have employees take advantage of their full $1,200 and take advantage of those scholarships, 2 per semester, up to 6 a year at one of the main community colleges at a 50-50 match.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any additional questions? Or is there anything in the chat that has not been answered? Okay, seeing that nobody is speaking up, I'm going to drop my email in the chat. It is going to take probably 90 minutes for me to generate this recording and a transcript. If you think of any questions in that time, please shoot me an email, and we will include that along with the FAQ. But we hope folks found this time useful, and we will certainly capture the chat as well, so that any questions that we go through and we didn't answer, we will include those. So let me get that up. So that is in the chat, and you will hear from us this afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.